It is quite the momentous day in Showtime Boxing. They have announced their spring and summer schedule. 9 events, 5 months, 21 undefeated fighters, 2 pay-per-views, multiple world title fights, and a whole lot more. Here to discuss it, he is slumming it with us in the MK studio. It's the president of Showtime Sports and, of course, my co-host, Brian Campbell. That is Stephen Espinoza. Hi, Stephen.
A pleasure to be here, guys.
Yeah, I mean, you're
already lying.
You're already lying.
I'm already lying. I haven't done it in person. I've done this by Zoom. I'm underwhelmed. I really am.
He's like, I knew you guys
Dad,
were.
is that you?
Yeah, he's like, I knew you guys were fat and unprofessional, but it turns out you're worse. Yeah.
Welcome, Stephen. This is a big day. I just announced that there's a lot going on. The 9 events, 5 months. Tell me your overall impression. If you were to describe this package of fights, how would you describe it overall?
The goal, and I think we achieved it, the goal was evenly matched fights among top-tier fighters. Now, that sounds simple enough. It sounds like, yeah, that's what the sport should be every day, whether it's MMA or boxing. Like, I think that's what we all aspire to. But I think this time we nailed it, and we nailed it. These are evenly matched fights. These are top guys fighting top guys for the next 4 months, and we're excited.
There's so many ways it can go, so many fighters I want to talk about, and storylines and angles, and it's look, there's blockbuster fights, there's sneaky good fights, but people are going to ask you in all these interviews up front and first and say about the fighters you didn't get. We all know you were dancing with Canelo, that maybe a Jermall Charlo super fight was close. How close was it, and how do you field this spot that, to be fair, anyone in your job has been in before, the managing of relationships, welcoming people, not burning the bridge, all of that goes into almost bringing Canelo back?
Yeah, look, it's a very personal decision. At the end of the day, like when you get to Canelo's level, you're entitled to make your own decisions. You're entitled to sort of say, look, it's my career. I'm doing it the way I want to do it. And Bernard Hopkins is famous for doing it his way. That became his mantra late in his career, and that is certainly is right. I think we put a very strong package there. It was financially, I think, the most lucrative package. For my money, and personally as a fan, I think the fights we put on the table for him are the biggest legacy fights that could have happened. But I think there's also a part of Canelo that wanted to do something new and different, and going to 175 is a big challenge, and I think that's what attracted him. So I think the biggest event for the U.S. market would have been Charlo. But that's not going to say that, I'm not trying to denigrate the Bebo fight. It is a big challenge. And we know Canelo spent a lot of time at 154 pounds. He's comfortable at 60, comfortable at 68, 75 is a challenge. Those are big, strong guys. So I respect what he's doing. I wish it was with us, but
and to be fair,
you can't win them all.
To be fair, he consistently, to his credit, matches himself great. There's not going to be a loss of a want to see him against Benavidez, to see him against Charlo, to see him against whomever there. Getting back to what you did able to book, and it's 9 fight cards, as Luke mentioned, and it's 2 pay-per-views. On April 16th in Dallas, Errol Spence Jr., Yordenis Ugas. Look, we know it. The heavyweight division can come and go. It can go in ebbs and flows, but welterweight in the De La Hoya, Trinidad, all the way through Mayweather and Pacquiao era has been the money, sex division in so many great ways. You've got a chance now on your network to arguably the winner of this fight is the power player without a question. If Errol Spence maybe already is coming in, would have 3 or 4 world titles. How important was it to you to get this on Showtime pay-per-view?
Oh, really important. I mean, he's a top pound for pound fighter. We'd love to have all the top fighters on the network. That's not always possible. But, getting, Errol Spence back, we have a history with him. We did his pro debut. We did his first title fight. We've been there at significant points in his career. And it's a big thing for the network just because of the caliber of fighter that he is, to do an event in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium at AT&T, 40, 50,000 people there. And the fight itself is an intriguing one. There's a tendency when you're dealing with the Canelos, when you're dealing with the Spences, to just assume, hey, they're always going to come out ahead. Like, they're pound for pound guys, they're always going to win. The reality, this is not an easy matchup. Ugas has been through the fire multiple times, and he's going to face the toughest Ugas, the most confident Ugas that we've seen. So look, this is not a cakewalk. That sounds strange to say, given that they're 2 of the top 3 or 4 guys in the division. But Errol has been so good for so long, there's sort of an assumption he's always going to win. this is a tough fight.
And he's got questions to answer.
I was going to ask you about that. Have you talked to him about his eye? What do you know about the recovery process there?
He's really, really comfortable and confident, and he's said it openly. This is his second chance, basically. There was, the first time he has the car accident, and that like anyone going through an experience like that is going to cause you to reevaluate everything and appreciate and all the cliches you want. They're all true, but then you go into this, and again, he feels like it was almost all taken away, because regardless of what you say, and he says, "Look, I didn't skip a beat. I knew I'd come back." Most fighters won't admit it. At some point, there's got to be like, "Hey, there's a lot of fighters who have been forced to end their careers because of detached retinas or eye injuries in general." So the fact that this one cleared and he's back, he's got a new appreciation again for what he has.
Well, how much confidence, if everything goes to plan with Spence Ugas, in terms of what Spence expected, Ugas expected with the network, like let's say there's mutual winning, to what degree do you have confidence Spence would be returning to the network? What does this event serve as a way to retain his services?
Look, I think it's an excellent question, because obviously our goal was to retain Canelo when we went through him, and we worked really hard to make sure that the event feels specific to them. I think that's one thing that boxing does very, very well. Is a Canelo event doesn't feel the same as a Charlo event. A Charlo event doesn't feel the same as a Spence event. And so we're there. We want to make it elevate the event, make it feel like a special event, a Spence event. And when he looks back, I want him to feel like we've left no stone unturned in terms of the marketing, the promotion, the creative, and elevated this more than anyone else could. I think we hit that mark with the Plant fight. I thought it was a great promotion. I thought the energy on fight night was incredible in the arena, and I thought that came through the telecast. And that's our goal. I mean, it's a heavy responsibility when you go into AT&T Stadium with 40,000 people. You want that to translate. You want people to feel it at home, because it's such a great atmosphere.
When we talk about this welterweight division, every fan and every journalist, and no one can talk to Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford without asking, when are you going to finally fight each other? Let's not do what we did with Mayweather-Pacquiao, even though the event was tremendous and they were luckily still 1 and 2 pound for pound at the time they fought, and there was so much in the sport at the time, legacy at stake, and obviously historically. What would you say to the question, though, regardless of who wins the Errol Spence Yordenis Ugas fight on April 16th, the other championship belt is around Terrence Crawford's waist, the WBO title. He's unbeaten. He's a network and promotional free agent as things stand now. Does Showtime potentially want to be in the Terrence Crawford business?
Sure. I mean, more importantly, we want to be in the big fight business. So if we're able to get a big fight for Crawford or Spence or Thurman or anyone else, those are businesses we want to be in. And now you hit on it. One important difference now with Crawford is he is a free agent. And not to point fingers, but part of the difficulties with some of these fights, as we just saw with Charlo Munguia, is differing business objectives and business parameters from different promoters and platforms. So with Crawford, the network affiliation, the promoter affiliation, that's been removed. So as long as there's a reasonable financial deal to be made, and parties can differ on what a reasonable financial deal is.
It sounds like they already are.
Yeah. So, but it's easier now than it has been in quite a while.
Right. Still, though, with pay-per-view, this is the part I want to talk about here. The Spence Ugas one will be one of the 2 pay-per-views you announced. The other one was with Tank Davis. We'll get to Tank in just a second, but just sticking with pay-per-view more as a topic, you only put 2 in the next 5 months. When you put pay-per-view, obviously, if you see Tank Davis on there, I would imagine it's just a foregone conclusion you're going to put it on pay-per-view. Spence Ugas, it merits it. But I guess what I'm wondering is, how do you think about how many you can do, especially now with DAZN kind of getting like full bore into it in some ways back again? This actually does put a question to the consumers about, how do I allot my time and my dollars? What is the Showtime positioning on that?
Yeah, I think there's some sort of misunderstanding, and I know where it comes from. Those who are not in pay-per-view like to create this narrative that, look, the network wants everything to be pay-per-view. Like there's some pot of gold there. It's not that lucrative. The reality is we're not making a ton of money on pay-per-views. That's There's not that incentive there for us. So the question is, how can we make fights happen? And sometimes we have enough in our budget. There's enough money that we can pay. And sometimes for a fight to happen, there needs to be another revenue stream. It's that simple. So yeah, like no one is all that interested in paying a bunch of money for a bunch of pay-per-views over a year. But the alternative sometimes is, okay, you can either have a fight happen and it's on pay-per-view, or probably a fight will not happen. Which would you rather have? 6 of one, half dozen of the other for some fans. But the reality is a lot of these fights would not happen without that revenue stream. Because if you look at it, 200,000 buys, 300,000, even at that level, which are considered, modest or, at the smaller end, 200,000 buys, you're netting at least $12 million. So that's a revenue stream. There aren't networks out there paying $12 million license fees.
Right.
So it's sort of hard to say to a promoter, like, hey, we can have the conversation. There is a back and forth, and there are plenty of fights that started as pay-per-view, and we were able to redirect them onto Showtime. But by the same token, if I'm not writing, if an event can do 200,000 buys or 300, and I'm not writing a check of 12, 18, 20, 25 million, it's tough for me to say, hey, look, I'm going to insist on you foregoing $20 million of revenue you could do so that everyone is happy. It's a tough position to be in.
I think there's a natural transition there, and you already mentioned it. You're going to get both Charlo brothers as part of this 9-event package, and it's fantastic. And May 14th, you're going to get Jermall, Charlo, Brian Castano 2, and that's worthy of a conversation itself, the rematch for all 4 belts on regular Showtime. You're going to get Jermall Charlo defending his middleweight title against Maciej Sulecki, who's a tough, battle-tested opponent, June 18th. That should be interesting, but this announcement, to be candid, got delayed. There was a lot of moving parts. You almost had Jermall Charlo versus Jaime Munguia, and it seemed like a priority for the network, and there's been a lot of back and forth on Twitter about DAZN and Golden Boy's role in this, and we're all friends and frenemies and all that at the same time. What happened?
Well, look, I don't blame Munguia at all. For his part, Munguia did his part. He accepted his deal. There was a deal in place for Munguia. Then where it sort of fell apart is at the promoter discussion level. We were backing an offer from TGB and PBC, the promotional entity and the packager of the fight. And of course, when we back a fight like that, we're going to say it's on Showtime. There was pushback from Munguia's team saying that there should be a split with DAZN. Candidly, the fight is a very good fight, an interesting fight. As a fan, I want to see it. It's not Mayweather-Pacquiao. We don't need 2 different platforms on it. There's just not enough room. It's overkill. So our suggestion was, okay, let's alternate. Simple enough. The rematch, Munguia wins. He gets, exercises his rematch. He can put it wherever he wants. So Charlo's the champion. Charlo's network and promoter are the ones making the offer. First fight is on his terms. Second fight can be on Munguia's terms. It sounded, to me, pretty reasonable. Went nowhere. So, look, I'm not sure exactly.
Did they explain why it went nowhere? Like, what was it? Why was it a non-starter for them?
They felt an obligation to involve DAZN. It's not my understanding, it's not illegal or contractual. There's not an exclusivity here. They wanted to sort of kiss DAZN into the deal. Now, I'm not sure DAZN really wanted into the deal. I've heard possibly they weren't all that interested in even collaborating for their part either. But, in any event, look, they wanted to be in the good graces of DAZN, and unfortunately that killed the fight.
Look, sorry to cut you off. To ask you this is a question we've always.
I'm used to it, bro.
Yeah, it's really our model. To ask you, I don't want to say about boxing's sins or their scars, because boxing's in an uptick. 2021 was a fantastic year. This schedule, along with what's going on elsewhere in the boxing world, there's a lot of great going on right now. But obviously, we have a lot of MMA fans on the show, and I'm thankful to say we are converting a strong group of that into boxing, appreciating the matchups, the sport, the passion, the history. But inevitably, they're going to fall into these broken parts of the system and go, wait, I like Charlo and I like Munguia. Why can't we just do that? Do you think overall, in the overall arc and narrative of that we are overall getting closer to getting past those things? Or are those inevitable with networks and promoters so equally aligned and other sides of the street? Like, is that Cold War ever going to end? How do you sort of look at where we're at in the arc of that?
I think I'd like to be optimistic and say we're through the worst of it. I think, when we see fights like Wilder Fury multiple times, there were obstacles to making that. Those got resolved. There have been situations where they're trading off. Like, I'll give you this fighter, you give me that fighter. So I think boxing gets it right more often than not. I think, what you hear from MMA fans is really the result of a better PR machine. MMA,
And more control. To be fair, they have much more control.
More control. And, at least when you talk about UFC, there is one voice. It's not always the accurate narrative. It's not always a truthful narrative, but there is one narrative.
It's not always politically correct, but it's...
So there is, that is it. And, I think there are a lot of thoughtful MMA fans who don't always accept that narrative they're being fed. Like, you don't always get the best matchups in the UFC. You get the matchups the UFC wants. Those aren't always the best matchups. They will tell you those are the best matchups. They're the best matchups for the UFC's interests. And, that's fine. They're a promoter. They have promotional interests just like boxing promoters do. But I do think that I think there's too little celebration of when boxing gets its right.
Sean Porter going to ESPN to fight Terrence Crawford was great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andy Ruiz, going to, doing 2 fights against Anthony Joshua, crossing promotional lines.
Michael Conlon and Lee Wood. I mean, we're seeing these wins, but I do think overall it's the best time for in a long time in this war, and I certainly hope it continues to go that way because I got to defend this sport. I love it. Yeah. It's like my old lady.
Yeah, you have to defend your old lady.
Yes, not my actual old lady, but the sport.
Speaking of some things that would need some defense, or at least some explanation, I think the fans and people out there would wonder. There are some fighters that were announced, including some of the pay-per-view headliners, that have had run-ins with the law. Tank Davis has had one. He's got something coming up in Baltimore. And then the Charlo twins both had. Now, it should be noted, at the time of this recording, they are innocent until proven guilty. Who knows what will happen? But they have all had run-ins. What is the Showtime position on all of these? How do you navigate when it's too much, when you want to defer to what the law does? How do you handle that?
Look, it is it's a really tough calculus, and it's not unique to boxing or combat sports. The NFL, the NBA, all deal with it to some form or another. The reality that we can just take them case by case. Rolly Romero had a really disturbing situation, which was unresolved at the time that he would be in the promotion, in the Tank fight. Therefore, we thought it was best not to involve him until it got settled. That took its course. There was a full investigation. We were informed, no charges were filed. And we're not in a position to sort of do a further investigation or, question that. We're not in a position to say, what did or did not happen. We have to rely on the authorities. So at this point, there is not anything in front of us which would lead us to the conclusion that he should not be in the air. I'm not discounting everything that happened, but we can also, in dealing with an individual who's earned his place at this point in the sport, what do we say to him when you say, look, well, we actually think despite the fact that the professionals who do this for a living investigated and found that there wasn't criminal activity to be charged, we feel differently and we're going to continue to boycott you. That's not a position we're going to be in. The Charlos will monitor that situation. For what it's worth, from what I've seen, it seemed more like a sort of internal, maybe familial conflict than something that's rises to the level of a serious criminal offense. But I don't know the full story, but from what I've seen, we'll let that play out, and if we need to take action, we'll take action.
Same with Tank. Obviously, his situation is unique as well.
Yeah, I mean, the reality in each of these situations, we never want to be a proxy for the investigators. So in each of these situations, what we ask is that there be some resolution, and, right. Tank's had his run-ins, and some are, most have been resolved, if not all, and they've taken those. And if there's a situation which, we believe deserves, further examination, we'll do it again.
Now, speaking of Tank, the original fight with Rolly was supposed to be in LA. Today it was announced that the Rolly fight will now be in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the switch here. I mean, I get it because when Tank goes out, the celebrities go out, so you want to be in a big city where that can happen. Is that really all it comes down to, New York, LA, and that's it?
Well, it's also, we've had a lot of events at the Barclays Center. It's one of our homes over the last several years. Now, after the change in ownership in the team, we haven't been quite as active there. Actually, we haven't been active at all. But they come back to the table, and I think for the good of continued events there at the event, we wanted to give them something big. And I also think for his fan base, to come back to the Northeast, to DC, Baltimore, New York City, it made sense. He's been in Atlanta. He's been in, he's scheduled to be in LA. And with
he's
the Rolly
moved tickets
fight,
at each stop. We got to give him that credit.
Absolutely. So it's been, I don't think he has ever headlined in New York City. He's been on the undercard at Barclays in one of his career-defining fights. And I think, you do $4 million gate in Atlanta, you do $4 million in LA, you can sell in New York.
And look, the Rolly Romero fight's going to have a crap ton of trash talk. It's going to be its own unique thing, May 28th in Brooklyn.
Yeah, when he talks, what happens in your head? I would love to know. Because I can tell you what happens in mine.
Rolly or Tank?
No, Tank is soft-spoken, doesn't say a whole lot. It's whatever.
Rolly's as unique a character in this universe as
Rolly is the MMA fighter, like in terms of his mind and how he works and how he talks, in the boxing world. Obviously, he's a boxer, but you know what I mean.
Rolly is the one guy who, more than anyone else, you have no idea what's going to come out of his mouth when he says it. And that's part. Sometimes I cringe, sometimes I laugh. It's never boring.
Yeah.
He's got a viewpoint. He's not. He's got all the confidence in the world. If there was a pound for pound ranking in terms of self-confidence,
irrational confidence. Belief, I need to drink whatever he drinks every morning.
He is absolute. He is the biggest believer in Rolly, as it should be.
Yeah.
But he will express that at a moment's notice.
All right,
no prompting necessary.
And Tank Davis is succeeding in selling out arenas in the variety of cities, but in becoming sort of that it fighter of the moment. Like it's remarkable the celebrity attention he gets at his fights, the hip hop world, the acting world. I mean, it's crossing over on a high level. We all know he's got that Mike Tyson part about him where anything can happen, he can knock you out. But his contemporaries at the moment, and again, this goes back to like an across the tracks conversation, but his contemporaries happen to be a group of young fighters. It's the Devin Haney's, Teofimo, Ryan Garcia.
Kambosos.
Kambosos, who has the titles. Vasily Lomachenko, who's a legend and still very much in the mix. You can even throw in Shakur Stevenson maybe joining that group. Now, even if Tank moves up to 140, there's even more names. And by the way, the Mario Barrios shootout was a fantastic sort of in-between fight for him on this march. How are you going to be able to cross that street? Because you never know who to believe. Everybody's selling a car. I just don't know who's selling the used one, the right way. Oscar will always say, we try to make Tank versus Ryan Garcia. It's just not happening.
And then Leonard Elby gets on Twitter and is like, no, Oscar's lying and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, if you're on the outside looking in, literally every party is accusing the other party of bad faith.
But Tank is getting to a star level where everybody wants to fight him and it will sell versus everyone. Can Mr. Reagan, Mr. Borishkov, can we kick that wall down, okay? Can we bring that down? Was that a wrong?
Borishkov?
Mikhail Baryshnikov, I think I messed it up with. I was going Gorbachev there. Meet me down at Gorky Park for the Winds of Change. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
No, you're absolutely right. It completely threw me off on the question. Let me see if I can regroup. The reality is, I've typically said this, and I'm not averse to sometimes, airing business negotiations.
You'll let that Twitter account. You'll just be like.
Yeah, I've tried to pull back because I've been honest. I think there's an inverse relationship between the amount of talking that goes about a deal and the amount of deal making actually going on.
Right.
So the more that someone's talking about the deal, I think in my experience, the less they're actually doing about the deal. I can say that on the Munguia front. There have been a series of statements. It's our top priority. It's our top priority. Top priority. In the meantime, there hasn't been a single word from Munguia's promoter since Thursday. And meanwhile, there's all these comments going out on social media saying it's our top priority. It's a top priority, but you can't pick up the phone and call a network or, the promoter on the other side. So I think Tank's going to get a big fight, and it's going to come out of the blue. And there are some interesting conversations going on. They've been going on for months. And, there are some obstacles to overcome. But when it happens, it's going to come largely out of the blue.
All right, cover your face so you don't show your cards. I hope he's saying Tank versus Manny Pacquiao because I would jump out of my clothes for that.
Really?
Okay. You don't like that? Because, by the way, Manny's not retired. He's not like really retired. He's like politically retired.
He's like Tom Brady retired.
He's not really,
41
he's not
days
really retired. Yeah, he didn't look the best against Ugas last minute election cycle. I get what you're saying,
right?
But I also think, look, some of the problem is everybody wants to be the A side and everybody wants the A side money. And unless you realize exactly where you're at.
Tank is the only one who has moved units in pay-per-view, right?
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the major hurdles.
Yeah,
right?
and he's also in a different class in terms of ticket selling. Right. At the gate. The number of guys who can do $4 or $5 million gates in multiple cities, you can count on one hand. In the sport of boxing, particularly in the U.S. So, that there has to be an acknowledgement. I'm not saying that, look, every time Tank fights, it's a 90-10 split his way, but people walking in and saying, 50-50 or, I'm 60-40 because I have a title, or Tank, which has a proven revenue stream, that's going to make it really hard to make a deal.
And too often people are like, oh, we'll fight, but you got to come to our network. You got to play by our rules, get our split. And
pay-per-view does solve that problem, though, right? I mean, the broadcast can be whatever, but if you put on pay-per-view, it's a little bit of a more everyone kind of win scenario.
Yeah, I mean, look, there have been creative solutions, and not to hammer on the Munguia solution, but we had the problem on Joshua Klitschko. Klitschko, at that point, Anthony Joshua had a Showtime deal. Klitschko had an HBO deal. So that was not one where we're going to put it on pay-per-view and split it. It was a fight from Wembley. And we split the broadcast. We did a live, they did a replay in the evening, and fans got a fantastic fight. So there's always solutions where people really want to make a deal. So typically, my other corollary to don't talk about deals is sort of like, if people really want a deal, they'll make a deal. So often when deals don't happen, personally I believe that there's someone in the process who didn't want it to happen.
All right, there was one name that was not on this list, which I thought was kind of interesting. Jake Paul. Jake Paul was not on the list. Now, I understand that these are high-level, high-end boxers, and Jake does a different thing, fine. But still, give us an update. How did business go with Jake, and where do things stand today?
I thought he was a really interesting and positive addition to our portfolio. And I think he was an overall positive to the sport. I understand not everybody is a fan of it, but not everyone's going to be a fan of every event that we do. But I think what Jake has demonstrated repeatedly is he's out there to build the sport. He does, in fact, build the sport. It's not all about Jake. He is supporting other fighters. Amanda Serrano is a great example. True. And he is bringing eyeballs to the sport. He's bringing eyeballs on issues within the sport, particularly, fighter pay. So, look, you may not like, his history as an influencer. You might not agree with everything he said. I think he's in a very different place now. And I think, right now, his focus is, among other things, on boxing. And he's been a net positive for the sport. He had a really busy year for someone in his position to fight 3 times in 1 year when you've got a whole bunch of other businesses as well is a lot. So he's taking a little bit of time. They've said to us that he plans to fight again, hopefully in the summer. And, there's no shortage. You guys know the names. It's fantasy boxing. It's like, what kind of matchup would you like to see him make? Is it a boxer? Is it a retired MMA guy? Is it a recent MMA guy? I think it's all on the table.
I'm interested in your stance on this because you watch Jake's fantastic marketing approach, which is aimed at a younger generation. He uses all the newer social media tools to his tricks. When he gets in a trolling war with Dana White, he lights Dana White on fire because this is he's a master troll. This is what he does. But his aim right now is obviously, let me get a big name MMA fighter. Let's do a crossover. Sometimes Jake is talking, I'll fight you in the UFC cage, but most of the time it's come fight me in boxing. And obviously we hit this divide of him attempting to troll Dana White hard enough, a guy you've had some spars with, to try to get him to bend and say, yes, let's team up, you MFer, I'll give you my guy. Is there a possibility of that happening? There's so much talk about fighter pay and the certain leverage and contracts on the UFC MMA side. I don't know how in-depth you are on that, but what is your opinion when you sit back and watch him pressing the buttons, Jake meaning on Dana, and trying to get Conor or Nate or any of these big MMA names across?
He's a master. Like if there's anybody I'm not going to engage with on social media, it's Jake. There's just no winning. Like he'll shoot a music video in 6 hours and put it up a diss track. It's ridiculous how quickly and thoroughly he's able to respond. Whether in fact that's going to bait somebody into it, I doubt it. It might bait another fighter, but when you've got huge organizations, like I don't think that someone's going to make a business decision based on that. Having said that, I think a large part of why Mayweather-McGregor got made was because there was so much chatter. It became undeniably clear how big the event would be.
It was a perfect storm. It was amazing.
And so if Jake's chatter and his trolling, generates that level of attention and builds that level of momentum, I think it could actually lead to a fight getting made because you're creating your own market. You're creating your own demand for the fight. So one of these things might catch fire more than the other ones and actually lead to a real fight.
Is the market a function of not so well with Woodley perhaps, but let's say going forward with a Nate Diaz, if that were ever to materialize, is the market a function of is Jake able to find this lane because MMA stars are underpaid?
I do think
if they were paid in the way that Tyson Fury was paid, is there a market there?
I don't think so. I don't think that there is a market if the financial upside wasn't so attractive. And I think part of it is, look, I think people underestimate Jake as well. I think it's easy to say, look, I've been a combat sports veteran for 15 years. This guy took up boxing a few years ago. Sure, easiest couple million I'll ever going to make. So I think that's part of it. But I also think that there is, it's sort of looking at the calculus. Yeah, I'm retired, or yeah, I'm semi-retired. If I can put together one more camp, I can make a multiple of what I've made for my last 6 fights in UFC combined. That's pretty attractive. I think if there was a different pay structure, that probably wouldn't have the appeal that it does.
I think that's smart.
One more.
Okay, because then I got to question our job security here.
Okay,
really,
I'm about to threaten it with this question.
Okay,
you can rail it home. The Jake Paul experience, the thing for me, having been on the ground I've been for the one Logan Paul and then the 2 the Jake Paul fights on Showtime. For the Jake Paul side, the thing that really got me, and I told him this to his face, was I was impressed with how much there was at that time. I remember he was showing up to UFC events, and Daniel Cormier was leaving the booth to get in his face. I mean, he had at that moment them in the palm of their hand. Mm-hmm. And the knockout of Woodley in the rematch was certainly, if you just watch the knockout, it was spectacular. Candidly, though, I would submit to you that the fights themselves were not great. They're not high-level boxers. What do you did you enjoy the fights? Yes, it was an interesting, clever way of doing business. It worked, all that. Were the fights good?
I'll tell you, that second fight, I thought the first fight was entertaining, I think because there was a large air of mystery, to it. You didn't know how it was
Was it a knockdown on the ropes? There was some drama built in there, yeah.
I think there was less of a mystery the second time, and it was an uglier fight, to be completely honest. So, look, it's a little bit like certain heavyweight fights. There have been heavyweight fights where there's a lack of action for 6 rounds, and then lightning strikes, a guy's out cold, and everyone leaves and goes home happy. So at the end of this, it didn't really matter what happened in that fight before that highlight reel knockout. Because if you had to go through a couple of slow rounds to get there, I think anybody would. To say, I was there, or I saw it live, it was, another meme-worthy knockout.
All right, I'm going to set off some fireworks in my pocket
here we
now.
go.
I hope that you don't get it.
Here we go.
Look, I always have fun with you in an interview, and I love your spunk, your spirit. I'm not coming on to you, although that's nice aftershave. I will say this:
who are you?
when a Dana White just drops a bomb on you at a press conference, oh yeah, that motherfucker, or when it's you don't try to become the headlines, but during the Mayweather-McGregor buildup, you and Conor McGregor are sparring back and forth, delivering one-liners, and it's kind of part of the entertainment package. How hard is it for you to kind of take an L and be like, it's probably better for business that I just not respond right now?
That's, I've never been asked that before, and it's an excellent question. And it is very difficult because anybody who knows me personally knows that is not my gut instinct. That's not my first, second, third, or fourth instinct.
To just take it on the chin.
To sit there. And I remember having a conversation after, I guess it was the Toronto, the Toronto tour stop with...
That was the crazy one.
Yeah, that was the crazy one. That's where things, the first time things went off the rails, and I got involved. I had a conversation with our CEO at the time, and I thought, how's this going to go? I'm not sure this reflects well on me and the company. I had the conversation, and he said, look, just take one for the team. This is great for the promotion.
But you got to be biting the inside of your lip.
and I was like, that wasn't the answer I was hoping for. But the reality is, look, you don't want to have one moment define the rest of your career as an executive, and
or anyone.
Oh yeah, or your life, to be defined by one moment. And there's nothing I'm going to do in that moment which is really going to win the day for me. So,
but even when you watch a random soundbite of Dana White, you're like, got a receipt coming one of these days.
Yeah, there's there is definitely still that knee-jerk reaction. Look, I've just got to remind myself of sort of, the person, the executive that I would like to be, as opposed to, the gut instinct I might have on a personal level.
Okay, then I want to show him something about loyalty right now.
Okay, show him.
Okay, because we got
what loyalty's all about.
We got a saying on this set that when you sit down on here, the culture changes. It's about real talk, like men do. And that's not misogynist. That's just, doubling down on what I am, man.
Okay.
So here's my thing. We often debate as Star Wars fans, huge, Showtime Combat pioneer, Gina Carano.
Is this where I leave?
Big part of this. This is where you get let go. We always debate, Chewbacca. You know Chewbacca, right?
Sure.
Dude, he was bout it as a friend, as a supporter. If shit goes down, Chewbacca is on the scene.
He's ride or die.
Luke has a little Chewbacca vibe to him. But
by the way, I'm the one that introduced this theory to him. So.
But I don't know how much MMA you've been watching over the past 2 years, boss. But January 2021, there's a big UFC 257 pay-per-view. It was Conor McGregor against Dustin Poirier in the rematch.
You're gonna bring this up, you fuck?
And we I don't know.
Dustin's wife.
I don't know if you know that we have documentary cameras following us. That's a Morning Combat documentary camera right there.
Okay.
I don't think you've seen any of our 6 documentaries, to be fair, right? If you did, we would probably
Which one's your favorite, Stephen?
to be fair, if he did, we wouldn't be sitting here anymore.
Did you say 6 or sex?
Six.
Okay.
Six.
Okay,
But
good.
no, if you know us well enough.
No one looks at us and thinks sex. Let me assure you.
So we have footage of, in the studio, we watched UFC 257's main event, McGregor Poirier 2.
Yeah.
And we got Luke's reaction to it on video. Can we throw to the videotape? I don't know if you
look at your stupid face.
I don't know if you remember.
Could you be redder?
Connor's leg looks like shit.
So this is real time as it's happening.
Poirier's walking, McGregor down with punches.
Also, I'm 40 pounds heavier.
Here comes Poirier, bitch!
Could I be balder? I mean, I got the worst hair on. Pulling on my pants.
Oh my God!
Oh shit!
Oh my God! He knocked him out! He knocked him out!
Was that you at the end of Mayweather McGregor?
So, this awkward reaction,
Hey, let's get going,
notwithstanding, I think he just showed you. I think that was like, who's the weasel now, motherfucker? This guy was bout it.
Well, I was more, in all seriousness, I don't know Conor McGregor to dislike him. I was so shocked in the moment. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
Because the fight, if you go back and watch the second fight, it just turns in an instant.
Right.
And then I was like, holy shit, I couldn't believe it.
So
here's the real question, Stephen.
So we got your back.
Well,
Yes.
look, whether it was that there have been more than enough karma to go around.
That's a fair point.
Since Mayweather McGregor. So I've had my share of Luke Thomas moments.
Yes.
for sure.
So that's not a good thing. You may not know this, but back in 2017, John Jones dunked on me at a press conference and blah, blah, blah. How many times have you just been in like an elevator or baggage claim and someone comes up and goes, "Hey, Weasel"? How many times does that happen? Ever?
It still happens to this day. And it's usually not that, because people, you rarely will walk up and, and insult me.
They do that to me, just for the
right. But there are some. Usually it's people who are yelling from far away who will say that.
Yeah. Okay.
But if someone comes up, it will be a more polite version of that. I'm like, you're that guy who.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but it still does.
And you're like,
Look,
by the way, I'm also a president of a cable network sports division.
Yeah, I also have a couple other accomplishments.
We can't keep you here all day, but I cannot talk about boxing without telling you how excited I am about what Tim Tszyu might be. Son of a legend, cost a Tszyu, and we are lucky enough on Showtime March 26th to get Tim Tszyu a very important test in his U.S. debut against Terrell Gausha. This would signify to me, Tim's daddy had big moments on Showtime. Fought Ricky Hatton, right?
Yep.
I mean, I know he lost that fight, retirement fight, but
Zab Judah.
I'm fired up to find out, because what your relationship with PBC provides you as access to 90% of what makes this 154-pound division great. If Tim Tszyu comes in here and enters this mix, we're going to make even more fun fights than we already are. What's the Tim Tszyu situation? We test in the waters here. We're saying, hey, come over. We're ready.
Look, the great thing here is, when you've got a critical mass of talent, there's a built-in incentive to stick around. So, I think, the way we entice him to stick around is saying, look, we're doing business with all these other guys, and we can help get you these fights. And I think he's got an appreciation, having, heard from him a little bit. He's got an appreciation for the network. His father's, signature moments were arguably mostly on Showtime, and he appreciates that. So there is real significance to him about making his debut in the U.S. on Showtime and following in his father's footsteps.
I gotta find out if he's for real. He looks at
He looks the real. The guy I'm interested in, and I know your time here is limited, so we got to wrap this up. But is the Boots signing, Jaron Ennis? So he is. Tell me the terms of the deal. I know he's going to be with the network for some time. That's it. How will it work with Jaron Ennis?
Yeah, I mean, the reality here is, we wanted to. He certainly attracted a lot of attention. He's sort of the consensus next guy in the division. And we've done a lot of work in that division. So, that's one way to sort of get into that division. If I'm on the outside looking in, is let me pick off one of the guys who's available. So I think as much as it is about Boots, it's also about keeping a cohesive group so we can continue to make great fights in that division. Because the more that we can keep them under the same banner, the more those fights are easy to make. So that was the goal there.
But what do you imagine his upside to be? I guess is what I want to know. How do you perceive him?
Well, you always say is you never know what they will do at the elite level until they're actually in the ring or in the cage. But having said that, he has fought increasingly accomplished and skilled talent, and the results have been the same. He makes it look easy, and he has yet to be really pushed. And he seems to have all the tools. So he's answered every question that's been asked at this point. Now the only question is, okay, how does he fare at the championship level?
Yeah, May 21st he'll be in the co-main event. A tough matchup with Custio Clayton. Of course, it's David Benavidez and David Lemieux in an important title contending 168-pound bout. I saw the specifics. Boxing Scene reported that the Showtime signs Boots, but he's not necessarily a PBC fighter, and that. To maybe if people aren't on the minutia of boxing, they may not understand that. Will that impact his availability of big name opponents in the long run? Do you think?
No. The reality, we've worked with, many fighters who are not PBC fighters. Look, they've got a bulk of the talent, and provide a bulk of our schedule. But it would be short-sighted for them and for us if we didn't have some flexibility to go out and grab a fighter like Boots, and do it. And so, as long as, he's all in the mix, then it really doesn't matter. PBC is not out there trying to, sign everybody in the world. They're going to have access to Boots, and Boots can get the fights that he wants through the network.
And if Boots keeps winning these mandatory #1 contenders, that kind of stuff, he's gonna get the chance no matter what. And
Absolutely.
We can't let this guy go without just mentioning June 4th, Stephen Fulton Jr. defending those 122-pound titles against former champion Danny
Boots is
Romero.
not fighting on the 21st. It's the 14th.
Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, you did.
I'm sorry. It's the May 14th.
That was underneath Charlo.
Jermall, Charlo, Brian Castano rematch. Good pickup right there. Yeah. I know your commitment to the 122-pound division. We love it. Fulton Figueroa was basically the fight of the year last year, and the players in that universe, including Luis Neri, other big names. This Fulton, Danny Romero, is the sleeper of this fight announcement. The real fans that know Luke, they know what they're getting here.
Well, if there was an award for Breakthrough Fighter of the Year, for me, it's Fulton. The year that he had, coming in, he's now fought 3 times on Showtime. Before that, he hadn't been on Showtime or really national TV, to speak of. I think he had been on FS1 on some smaller shows. But the reality, where he came from being sort of, I wouldn't say unheralded, but, an up-and-coming prospect to a point where now he's a unified champion with 2 belts in the span of 3 fights over a little more than a year.
And the level of opposition that he's facing.
The level of opposition
in particular.
And the way he's performed in those fights, he is really, you talk about answering the bell for those types of challenges, you can't ask for more than what Fulton has done over the last year and a half.
So last one from me. we don't know what the truth is, and I don't know who does here, but you probably have more access to it than we do. Sort of a two-parter, one real question, which is, listen, these fights are all going to be on Showtime or Showtime pay-per-view. It's not like we're clamoring to be on networks, but there is always that sort of CBS equation. They did put on Danny Garcia fights and Keith Thurman fights, and they did really well.
They did, what, 5 million views or something with Thurman?
And speaking of PBC, it is believed, our understanding of it, which could be quite wrong, is that this is going to be basically the last year between PBC and Fox. That's what the rumor is that we hear from folks we talk to. So what does this mean for all of those relationships going forward?
Well, I think part of your question is, would we go back and put more boxing on CBS? And I think that is an option. I think we do it selectively. CBS is the most watched network. So there's not really a lot of slots on the network that aren't valuable. It's sort of like here's a
I think
random
Moro's
Saturday night.
taking them up with his new reality show.
Well, that's true.
Okay?
Now we're competing with Moro's reality show. So I think we would use it sparingly. Like it really has to be a special event, like Thurman Garcia, like Thurman Porter, and something which I think would be, important and worthy in itself, but also meaningful for the fighters to take them to the next level. And I think that's what it did for Thurman and Garcia and Porter, is take established guys and just push them that much higher because they fought in such big audiences.
Hey, they want to put fights on big CBS again. They want us to call the fights from ringside wearing this exact clothing on this couch.
Dude, I'll take almost
anyone's
anyone's check if CBS wants to cut me a check for that.
Stephen Espinoza, the president of Showtime Sports, you got real with us. Okay?
Did I get real enough? We can.
Got real enough.
We can do a deep dive on the.
You know what?
We have another show called Room Service Diaries where we really try to get fired, where we drink.
Okay, then we can go into the UFC White McGregor.
There it is.
Happy.
Have Dana White, last one for me, swear to God, has Dana White or Conor McGregor ever DM'd you?
No. Their contacts have all been public. They're usually random. Sometimes I haven't even said anything, and I come up in conversation, which always strikes me as sort of strange. Sometimes I provoke it, intentionally or not. But the reality, that's a question I get pretty often. It's sort of like, the whole Conor thing was a put on, right? You guys were behind the scenes friendly. I'm like, no, this is not WWE. This was not a work like this. What happened behind the scenes was similar to what happened, in front of the scenes.
Okay, my final question now.
Are we fired?
Look, you've done a lot of great since coming to this position for Showtime, and I'm sure a lot that you're proud of. What are you most proud of? What makes you like? I'm not saying what's your first line of your obituary going to be.
Well, could you underhand that softball a little higher?
I'm for sure you're going to outlive me and my black liver. I've got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Just wanted to point that out. All right.
Right.
What are you most proud? I mean, you've been at the chair for some of the biggest fights in modern history.
Well, look, the easy answer would be the biggest events. I mean, doing 2 events which did over 4 million pay-per-view buys. Like nothing else has come close, and I don't think in my lifetime anything will. So that's the easy answer. But I think if there's one thing I would want people to say after I'm gone, whether gone literally or gone from this position, is that I was good for the sport, that I helped elevate the sport. If people could look at my tenure, my involvement in the sport, and say, look, he helped advance the sport and elevate it and did good things for the sport, then I will be proud of my legacy. I'll be happy with the response.
See, by throwing you that softball, I was expecting you to say green lighting morning combat was the greatest thing. But I'll take Mayweather, Pacquiao.
Right, yeah.
And by the way, to be fair,
that was going to be third on
if
the
I was
list.
writing your legacy, you were in power when Floyd came over to Showtime in 2013.
Big coup, yeah.
And that brought all of the other fighters with him, and that led to the launch of PBC. That shifted the power balance.
Is that the most formative deal, non-fight deal? Like
that
not like
the power
X versus
balance,
Y.
okay?
No, but that was a huge shift.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was very meaningful substantively, meaning to get those fights and get the audience and be able to draft off of that. But it is also as important psychologically and symbolically to say, look, we're not Avis, we're number 2 and we try harder. No, we are in it to win it at the highest level. We're going to compete on the biggest stage.
Wow, 2013 was a great year. 2021 was just a great year. the Showtime Boxing Spring and Summer schedule. Full circle on the ass kiss is going to be a great
There it is. And all the fights, if you want to check them out with all the dates, they are available all over social media, on the website. There have been press release. It should be out everywhere.
I was just wondering, like, I didn't really see any Showbox fights announced on this rollout at all.
I also noticed your name was conspicuously absent.
I mean, can we get a Showbox date in this group?
Yeah, we're going to have to go back on that. I think your involvement was underplayed. We need to trumpet that a little bit more. I think that would really boost ratings.
I do big numbers in like trashy settings, like factory towns, like Deadwood,
Okay.
South Dakota.
Certainly among all Showtime commentators, you're the #1 mouth breather. I think
Oh,
that's
right.
fair.
Wrap it up.
All right. That's Stephen Espinoza, the president of Showtime Sports. Brian Campbell, Luke Thomas, thank you for coming by the set.
A pleasure.
And
always.
that's it for us. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.